Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 10th of December. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. It's great that you could join us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Ending months and months of gridlock, the National Assembly passes scores of key bills with a handful aimed at improving welfare and rooting out corruption among public officials. An extraordinary session will open next week to pass the remaining bills. Korea's fertility rate, already among the lowest in the world, falls for the first time in 4 years, despite a range of government measures to encourage families to have more kids. Plus, a US Senate report shows the CIA used extreme brutality during its interrogations of terror suspects following the 9/11 attacks. It also says no useful intelligence was gleaned from the tactics. But we start at Korea's National Assembly, where after months and months of parliamentary deadlock, lawmakers finally passed core bills, with many aimed at improving the nation's welfare system and tackling corruption. But other critical bills will have to wait until an extra session slated for later this month. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
Starting next year, families facing severe financial hardships will get more help from the government. The National Assembly passed 3 revised welfare bills Tuesday that will expand the scope of beneficiaries and put up a strong safety net for destitute families. The bills were proposed after a mother and her 2 daughters committed suicide in February in Seoul because of financial troubles. On top of the welfare bills, rival parties also passed an anti-corruption bill that will restrict public officials from getting new jobs for up to 3 years after they retire. It's intended to stem the long-standing practice of government officials taking jobs related to their area of purview after retirement, something that often leads to corporate malfeasance and negligence. Violating the law carries a possible punishment of 2 years in prison and fines of $18,000. However, the parliament has been dragging its feet on another anti-corruption bill that would set up stricter punishments for civil servants who receive bribes. It is still up for review in committee as lawmakers are at loggerheads on whether families of civil servants should be subject to punishment if implicated in a related bribery case. Lawmakers are trying to minimize any subjective interpretation of the bill. Another issue on hold is reducing lawmakers' privileges. Rival parties failed to come to an agreement on a clause that will strip lawmakers of their immunity from arrest while Parliament is in session. It's a contentious matter that has been brought up nearly every election cycle for years, but there has been no real action so far. With the regular parliamentary session over, it is likely that the bill that will strip lawmakers of certain privileges will be taken up at an extraordinary session that opens December 15th. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, staying in domestic politics, and the leaders of Korea's ruling and main opposition parties are meeting on this Wednesday in an attempt to smooth out their differences on a number of pending issues. Dubbed the 2+2 joint meeting, 2 leaders from each party, including ruling Sony party leader Lee Wang-gu and his New Politics Alliance for Democracy counterpart, Woo Young-gun, will try to reach a compromise on a public official's pension plan, as well as launching a probe into possible corruption related to a major river renovation project. Now, this isn't the first time these parties have met like this. Leaders from the 2 sides held a similar gathering last December, in which they did find some middle ground on some key issues through the establishment of a special committee. Now, recent allegations that a former aide of President Park Geun-hye has been meddling in state affairs without a formal position has been grabbing headlines here in Korea in recent weeks. For more on how the controversy has led to calls for a complete overhaul of the president's leadership style, our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
Days after vehemently dismissing a recent media report alleging her former aide has been exercising influence over state affairs, President Park Geun-hye at Tuesday's cabinet meeting further tightened her grip on the administration.
모든 언행이 사적인 것이 아니라 국민을 바라보고 행하는 그런 사명감에 충실할 수밖에 없습니다.
This was likely in response to former Culture Minister Yoo Jin-young claiming that President Park had personally ordered dismissals of personnel within his ministry, which fanned allegations that some of the president's aides were abusing their influence. The presidential office last Friday denied Yoo's claims. Despite President Park's firm stance, pollster Realmeter says support ratings for the president dropped days following the November 28 media report. A group of the ruling party's first and second-term lawmakers, meanwhile, urged the president to turn the situation into an opportunity to reform her style of running the country, be more transparent in appointing personnel, and communicate better with officials and the public. The prosecution's investigation into the leaked document in the media report will soon announce its findings. But what the public is more concerned about is how the president will make her administration more transparent and improve the current system of running the country. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
And President Park has expressed hopes of sharing the vision behind her economic innovation plan with the Southeast Asian country of Brunei. Meeting with the Sultan of Brunei at her office on Tuesday, the president compared her three-year plan to spur economic growth and create jobs with a similar initiative in Brunei, and she added that she looks forward to sharing each other's wisdom and experience. On that front, Korea seeks to win infrastructure projects in Brunei. The Sultan, in response to the president's comments, touted Korea's achievements, particularly in cutting-edge technology. Now, following their summit, the two leaders also signed deals, including one on agricultural development and cooperation. And leaders from ASEAN member countries, including the Sultan of Brunei, are gathering steadily but slowly in Korea's southern port city of Busan ahead of a special summit that marks 25 years of relations. Now, this event is going to be huge, and it's expected to take the two sides' economic ties to the next level. Now, Hang Jie reports.
Despite the slumping global economy, Korea's trade volume with ASEAN has been on a steady rise, thanks to a free trade agreement between the two parties and the Korean wave that boosted demand for Korean products and services. Since 2007, after a free trade deal went into effect, the trade volume between Korea and ASEAN rose more than 11% on average every year and exceeded the $100 billion mark for the first time in 2011. ASEAN now stands as Korea's second largest trading partner following China. But when looking at their economic relationship in the longer term, experts point out the excessive trade surplus that Korea is recording with the Southeast Asian group.
The huge trade deficit ASEAN is posting with Korea will become a thorny issue as both parties try to strengthen their economic cooperation. The trade imbalance will have to be resolved down the road.
The ASEAN Economic Community that's set to be established next year, however, is expected to become a new opportunity for Korea to further expand ties. The community aims to achieve regional economic integration with a single market and production base, making it easier for Korean companies to do business there. During the two-day summit in Busan, Asian leaders will also lay out a blueprint for cooperation and set a new goal of increasing trading volume to $200 billion by 2020. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
And staying with that summit that kicks off in Busan on Thursday, and South Korea is expected to call on its friends in Southeast Asia to help it deal with North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The support might be forthcoming, but ASEAN nations will likely want something in return, as our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
When it comes to diplomatic cooperation, South Korea and the ASEAN countries are at a clash of interest. South Korea is seeking support for its efforts to counter North Korea's nuclear weapons program, but its Southeast Asian partners are hesitant since the issue already involves the big powers like the United States and China. The ASEAN nations want Seoul to stand on their side in the South China Sea maritime dispute against Beijing, something that could shake up South Korea's relations with China. All this will be up for discussion when President Park Geun-hye meets the leaders of 10 ASEAN countries in Busan later this week. The Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit will be another occasion for dialogue among the Middle Power nations, along with the ASEAN Regional Forum and the ASEAN Plus 3. Since the 10 nations attending the upcoming summit have diplomatic ties with both Koreas, they could play a unique role on the Korean peninsula.
By explaining the situation on the Korean peninsula from our point of view and making the ASEAN countries aware, they can act as a bridge between South and North Korea. They can also indirectly deliver their objective perspective on a certain issue to Pyongyang.
And since Southeast Asian countries, namely Thailand and Laos, are one of the most taken routes for North Korean defectors, cooperation on that issue could be one of the informal agenda items at the upcoming meeting. 황상희, 아리랑 뉴스.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 50. Korea has confirmed its plan to send 30 medical workers in 3 separate dispatches to Ebola-hit West Africa. The Foreign Ministry says the first group, 4 doctors and 6 nurses, will leave Seoul on Saturday. The second group is expected to travel to West Africa in January, with the remainder set to leave in February. The medical workers will receive safety training for a period of 1 week in London first, before they then head to Sierra Leone. The Korean government will also provide an additional $5 million to join global efforts to fight Ebola. Korea's fertility rate, already worryingly low, has dropped yet again after slowly but steadily rising over the previous 4 years. The Ministry of Health and Welfare says Korea's fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, stood at a mere 1.19 in 2013. That's the same figure recorded in 2008. But over the next few years after 2008, it gradually edged up to 1.3 in 2012 before dropping again. The drop last year is especially noticeable among women in their late 20s and 30s. The ministry attributes this to the rising average age Koreans get married, as well as shifting attitudes about the need to tie the knot and start a family. A nation's fertility rate must hover around 2.1 in order to maintain current population. So you can see it's a big problem. The proportion of elderly people in Korea accelerated as well, with the trend showing that pensioners will surpass the number of children under the age of 14 in 2017. The number of new jobs added in Korea last month rebounded for the first time since August on the back of growing home transactions. Data from Statistics Korea shows the number of people in work stood at nearly 26 million in November. That's up roughly 440,000 from a year earlier. The agency attributes the quickening job growth to greater job creation in the health and social welfare services sector and the construction industry, which was boosted by the country's improving housing market. Korea's jobless rate, however, did rise by 0.4 percentage points last month from last year to 3.1%. Now, the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex will mark its 10th anniversary next week, and while you could say it's a notable achievement, just getting to 10, given the to and fro tensions between the Koreas, many watchers say the industrial park has never truly reached its potential due to Seoul and Pyongyang's rocky relationship. Our Park Ji-won reports.
In the 10 years since the Inner Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex first opened, operations have grown with more than 120 companies currently operating there. However, manufacturing output has been less than steady, stunted due to political and security instability. Last year, operations at the complex were halted for more than 5 months after North Korea withdrew its tens of thousands of workers amid diplomatic tensions. That slashed both output and the industrial park's credibility. Despite the limitations, South Korea has gained a direct economic benefit worth over $3.2 billion over the past 10 years from the venture, while North Korea's total comes to $380 million. That's according to a new report from the Hyundai Research Institute. But it also talks about the unrealized potential of the complex. The industrial park currently measures about 3.3 million square kilometers in size, which is just about 5% the size laid out in the original plan.
Most operations at the complex center now focus on simple processing. The next phase should focus more on high-value added industries like heavy chemicals and tourism. The final phase would aim to become an economic hub of Northeast Asia.
The institute adds that should operations at Kaesong ever approach the final phase of the development, the venture could bring in over $68 billion worth of benefits for both Koreas. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Now, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, says it still can't figure out who was or wasn't the mastermind of last month's devastating cyber attack on Sony Pictures. Speaking at a cybersecurity conference in Washington on Tuesday, senior FBI official Joe Demarest said there's nothing linking North Korea to the attack. That led to the theft of thousands of files, leaked unreleased movies onto the internet, and revealed confidential information about the company's employees. Now, analysts say the remark suggests the FBI may be broadening its inquiry. There had been a great deal of speculation North Korea was behind the cyber attack, as the regime was furious over the upcoming release of a Sony Pictures comedy movie called The Interview, which you can see the trailer for here, which depicts two Americans attempting to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. A scathing report is out revealing the brutal ways CIA agents interrogated terror suspects after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. For more on this huge story, we join Eunice Kim at the News Centre. Hello there, Eunice.
Hello.
So, unlike previous claims, really, this report says the torture tactics employed by the US agents were essentially completely ineffectual.
That's right, Mark. In fact, it claims that there was no extraordinary intelligence gained from the interrogation sessions that couldn't have been gained by any other means. Sessions that were, the report says, far more brutal than had previously been characterized. Now, page after page of this 500-page summary recounts horrific tactics used on al-Qaeda captives and other terrorist suspects in secret detention facilities around the world by U.S. agents. That includes weeks of sleep deprivation, humiliation, among other tactics, waterboarding, of course, one of those. Released on Tuesday by the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee, it said the CIA intentionally misled the public, lawmakers, and even the White House, that's the George W. Bush administration, and that many of these techniques were beyond the confines of law.
And Eunice, given the very confidential black ops nature of these kind of activities, I understand there was significant resistance to this report being made public.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of discussion on what should be released and what should be censored. Even reports of the CIA getting in the way of the Senate investigation ahead of Tuesday's release. Now, since its release, there are already voices from the United Nations for justice to be held against the wrongdoers. According to international law, that's from the UN Human Rights Council Special Investigator Ben Emerson. And outraged critics, including those in the CIA and also Congress, argue that the report was flat out wrong and that its release was politically driven. Now, ahead of the summary's release, security was boosted at U.S. embassies and other American facilities around the world in preparation for possible retaliation.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's just the first we've heard about that story. It's going to run and run and run, I'm sure. Now, in some good news for France, the country's last hostage has been freed from the hands of Islamic militants.
Right, and that is coming from the French president himself. President Francois Hollande announced that Sergei Lazarevic was released on Tuesday and was on his way home to Paris. The 50-year-old businessman had been kidnapped back in November of 2011 from his hotel room and held prisoner of al-Qaeda's North African arm since then. President Francois Hollande said he was the final French national held hostage anywhere in the world, and he thanked authorities in Niger and Mali who had, quote, worked towards this happy outcome. Now, authorities are staying mum on how they arrived at Lazarevic's release. Paris has insisted that there was no ransom paid, but there are suspicions that the release was a result of a prisoner swap deal. And Mark, if in fact this was a prisoner exchange, that would pit France against allies like the U.S. once again, who are, of course, against striking any deals with terrorists.
Yes, they have very different policies on how to negotiate or not negotiate with terrorists, but it's certainly good news for that man's family, waiting for his release for so long, not knowing his fate. Well, thank you ever so much, Eunice, and we'll see you again at noon.
See you then.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2014 KBO Golden Glove Awards, which honor the best players in each position for the 2014 season. And highlighting the event was Nexen Hero sluggers Huggon Chung, who received the award for the second baseman category, adding to the MVP honor he received this season. And his teammate Andy Van Hecken, who posted a 20-win season, became the first foreigner to be honored in 5 years, winning the pitchers category. Meanwhile, Samsung Lions slugger Lee Seung-yup set a new KBO record, winning his 9th Golden Glove Award, this time for the designated hitter category. And staying in the KBO, after the presidents of the KBO teams got together for a meeting on Tuesday, they've decided on adding a new wildcard game between the 4th and 5th place teams starting in 2015. Now, to make the KBO postseason a bit more exciting, the KBO has decided to add an additional game before the usual best-of-5 series between the 3rd and 4th place teams. Now, the new format, the 4th and 5th place teams will face off, and if the 4th place team wins or ties, they advance to the next round. Meanwhile, the 5th place team needs to win twice in order to advance to the next round, adding their own twist to what the MLB does with their wildcard playoff game. Now, there are things that just don't mix, water and oil and sports and politics. And with the national football team head coach Uli Stilleke holding a conference in front of the K-League Classic managers on Tuesday, he stressed the importance of leaving politics out of sports. Now, in a luncheon with head coach Uli Stilleke and the head coaches of the K-League Classic teams, he stressed the idea of leaving politics out of sports, adding that it was regrettable that there have been political interventions in football. Now, this comes after Seongnam City Mayor and current owner of Seongnam FC Lee Jae-myung was punished for his remarks in the officiating of the K-League referees, while South Gyeongsang Province Governor Hong Jung-pyo was not. As Mayor Lee Jae-myung stated, it was because of the difference in the political parties. Meanwhile, manager Stilleke hopes to hold more conferences in the future regarding technical issues. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, temperatures will remain on the mild side, with highs peaking to similar to yesterday, but clouds will be sticking around throughout the day, and late night snow is in the forecast for many parts of the nation. So Seoul will receive less than 1 centimeter of snowfall, overnight, while the parts in Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do province will see somewhere between 1 and 5 centimeters of snowfall, which could lead to a slippery road tomorrow morning. And as for today's readings, the top temperature here in Seoul will hike up to 4 later in the afternoon, while other parts will see somewhere between lots 8 and 11 later in the day. Now, as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will be getting up to 15, while Daejeon and Dokdo sees highs of 5. Now, cold snap will return on Friday, bringing down the lows to quite chilly side. Then another round of snow on Monday will drop down the lows to below -10 here in Seoul next week. Well, that's all for now. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. And that's all we have for now. There are plenty more stories online, and it's also worth checking out our smartphone app, which has all the latest news and programs as well. We'll be back at noon Korea time with our next newscast. Until then, goodbye.